Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the third episode of Fully Endorsed. Here with me, as always, the man whose channel this is, Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
Hello, people of the internet. And boy, am I excited to talk about some game show scandals today.
Yeah, this is a weird pick, obviously, but here we are.
But boy, is it a really good pick.
Andres was skeptical. He was skeptical, and then he watched it, and he realized why I did the things that I did. So yes, today we're talking about Big Bucks, the Pressure Luck Scandal. This was a made-for-TV documentary that aired in 2003 on the Game Show Network, which is a channel that not everybody has, but if you have a satellite such as a Dish Network, which is what I've had for years, then you might have a Game Show Network. And it's all about a scandal that happened on Pressure Luck, as the title suggests, in 1984.
Yeah.
1984. So this was 19 years after the initial scandal that this documentary was released. And this is one of the greatest stories that's never told. This is
essentially like the American dream right here. A man who beat the odds only to lose it all.
They should teach this in schools.
About how to hack, it's like, this is pretty much like the ultimate life hack story.
Also, if anybody is listening to this in Hollywood, why isn't this a movie? Make it a movie immediately.
Totally. I can definitely imagine, like, I don't know, Zach Galifianakis playing Michael Larson.
Right. It's difficult to decide where to begin, I've just realized.
Should we start by explaining to our younger audiences what game shows are?
Oh, sure. So game shows are not just a thing that Channel Awesome tried to do. They have, in fact, been around for almost as long as television has been around. A game show is a television program that one goes on and competes, usually in some sort of a trivia contest, in an attempt to win money and or prizes.
Right. And there's been there have been many game shows that have come and gone over the years. And they are generally for a family audience. Most notable ones are probably like the Wheel of Fortune. That's one that's like been in the sort of pop culture ether for a while. The Jeopardy, The Price is Right.
I know that when I was a young man, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was the hot shit.
Ooh, yes. Or what was it? Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader was a big one growing up.
Oh, yeah, Deal or No Deal?
Yes, Deal or No Deal. That was a big one. Let's see. What was the one? The Weakest Link. Do you remember that one?
I do remember The Weakest Link. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can never forget it because of that episode of Doctor Who.
Right. I was about to bring that up.
the android.
Right. You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what a game show is. Backing up even further, television was the thing that you watched before Netflix came around.
Right. We have to explain to the young viewers what television is.
It was sort of like radio, but with pictures. Now, radio... I'm going to stop now before we go all the way back to the invention of fire. Game shows are a big thing. Used to be a lot bigger in the pre-streaming age. And in the 80s, one of the most popular game shows was a little show that aired on CBS called Pressure Luck. There's actually a version of this that runs currently that's hosted by Elizabeth Banks. But in the 80s,
Rita Repulsa?
Yes, hosted by Rita Repulsa. But in the 80s, it was hosted by a fellow named Peter Tamarkin, who is also the host of this documentary. Andres.
Yes.
Just what'd you think of this story?
Well, I've never heard of Press Your Luck before. I mean, I know the saying of pressing your luck, and my only real exposure to it was, ironically enough, Channel Awesome's Pop Quiz Hotshot, in which they ripped off the idea of the whammies by using the spazzies, which had a completely different and almost useless function. But however, I did remember, like, within the sort of again, like the sort of cultural zeitgeist, I have heard people many times go like, big bucks, big bucks, big bucks, no whammies, no whammies, no whammies. And
right,
so, like,
you never knew what they were referencing.
Right, I didn't know what they were referencing, but I knew, like, they were, like, sort of, like, gambling. They were either gambling on something, or, like, they were about to make they're making a huge gamble and they're hoping for a large payoff. I could understand that much. And
yeah,
so
I say it sometimes when I'm, like, rolling dice.
Right. That's what. Yeah, so an event like that is when I would hear people recite that saying. So, having watched the Big Bucks, the Press Your Luck scandal with you on YouTube, I noticed, wow, okay, so this was a pretty big deal for it to have sort of stayed in the public consciousness for such an amount of time. And
that's an interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting. If I can segue into a different question,
sure.
Before you continue your general thoughts.
Of course.
That's an interesting point. Sort of similar to the situation with Galaxy Quest, in which you had very limited exposure to Star Trek. Do you think that this documentary, as somebody who had no idea what Press Your Luck was, sort of did a good enough job of cluing you in on what do you feel like you have an understanding of the game having watched this documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I was able to get, like, I know you were explaining to me before watching the documentary together, you were explaining to me, like, the ins and outs of how the game worked, but I feel like the documentary on its own does a good enough job at explaining to audiences what Press Your Luck was all about and how the whole game worked. And so, I pretty much now know the basics of Press Your Luck. You answer questions. The more questions you get, the more opportunities you get to sort of spin the wheel. And so once you're able to spin the wheel, you can either get money or lose money or pass those. It's all about gambling. Yeah, the whole risk and reward system. You either continue spinning the wheel and get potentially more money or potentially lose all your money, or you can pass it off to the next person if you can. Yeah, it's a basic enough premise, I think, for a game show. And usually the most simplest premises are the ones easily to make it big with audiences. You certainly don't want to have a game show that's too complicated for audiences to follow.
Right, it's a pretty simple game, and I think the thing that really makes it work is the inclusion of the whammies, because that is an element that really just ratchets up the tension every time somebody decides to go for a spin. Right. Every time somebody presses their luck. It's really nerve-wracking, and I think you got a sense of that watching the documentary as
well. Indeed. Especially, like, early on, before Michael Larson, like, wrecked everyone's shit. Like, you can sort of tell, like, the other guys, they almost look like they had a fighting chance, and it's like, oh, whammies, back to $0.
Right.
And I can see in their eyes that, I can see it on their face, they're like, no! I could feel their anguish when they hit a whammy on the wheel.
Yeah. So I guess we should explain who Michael Larson is, right?
Yeah.
Michael Larson was a ice cream truck driver from Ohio who was obsessed with television and get-rich-quick schemes, and he really wanted to make a lot of money very quickly. And he realized, by watching just hours and hours of Press Your Luck, that the big board had a set number of patterns. See, okay, now I kind of have to explain the big board.
Okay, yeah. It's a big square with little squares surrounding it.
And... Right. Andres referred to it earlier as spinning the wheel, but it's not really a wheel. It's rectangular, and surrounding the rectangle are squares that contain prizes, money, and or whammies.
Right. And again, if you hit the whammy, you lose all your money for that turn.
Right, and the light on the board doesn't go around like in a circular fashion the way a wheel would either. It sort of darts around the board in a seemingly random fashion. So it makes it seem even more sort of foreboding, because you never know where it's going to jump to right when you hit the buzzer. So many times I've seen people hit the buzzer just a second too late, and they whammy when they would have gotten a prize, you know?
Uh-huh.
But
Oh, and on top of that, each square has a prize. Each square is set with one of 3 different prizes, I guess you could say. So one square could constantly switch between this many dollars, or a whammy. Or this other square in the opposite corner could have an extra this much money and an extra opportunity to spin the wheel, or a whammy.
Right, you never know where a whammy is going to pop up, and you never know where the light is going to go, and so it's all made to create the illusion of complete randomness. But what Michael Larson realized was that it was in fact not random, that the light on the board was actually going around in a distinct pattern. In fact, there were only 5 patterns.
Yes.
And he manages to memorize all 5 of these patterns, and then go on the show and just go on a roll and never hit a whammy and keep getting extra spins.
Right.
And he winds up essentially swindling CBS out of $100,000.
Yeah. Specifically $110,237.
And that is why Michael Larson is an American hero.
Right. As we'll get to later in this review, he'll become an American dumbass.
Yeah, yes, but for that brief moment,
right? He was the hero. Yeah, he was the Robin Hood of America. He was Americans' Robin Hood.
He was Michael Larson, the legend.
Yeah,
the hero we needed.
So yeah, it's like these light patterns, as they don't tell us right away. What I like about the documentary, they kind of tell us bit by bit. Like, notice how he's focusing on the board, noticing that he's put his hands together in order to hit the button, the stop button at the precise moment he wanted. Notice how he was almost playing around with the audience in the first round before getting serious in the second round. Notice at this point he felt a bit. Despite winning a prize, he had a bit of disappointment for a split second. So they're like, pay attention to him, and then later we'll tell you exactly what he's paying attention to. Yes,
that's probably the best thing about the documentary, really. Watching it again, as somebody who already knew the story, revisiting this after all these years, the thing that really makes it engaging, I think, is the mystery element. They sort of drag it out. They make you go pretty much, I think, half the documentary before they finally clue you in on how exactly he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful moment where they explain it to you, and then all of a sudden you see it.
Although for me, I didn't see it exactly. I know you were telling me this after we saw the documentary. You were wondering whether or not I would catch on to what Michael Larson was doing, but I didn't because I'm a dumbass. And then once they fully explained it to you, because the cool thing was the host of this documentary was the host of Press Your Luck, and he brought back the other 2 contestants from that set of episodes.
Yes.
The game went on for so long, it was split into 2 episodes, I believe. And
yes, which I believe was a first for the show.
Right. So he brought over the other 2 contestants, and he was explaining to them how Michael Larson won. And so, yeah, they mentioned how there's a set pattern, and they showed one pattern specifically. So it's like, it would go from square 2 to square 12 to square 1 to square 9 to square 4. And like square 4 has a lot of money, prizes, and a lot of extra spins, but no whammies. So at that point, sorry, go ahead.
That's the part that CBS really fucked up. Honestly, that's the part that baffles me, because memorizing all these patterns would have been meaningless if not for the fact that 2 of the squares on the board, squares 4 and 8, never have a whammy in them.
Right, so he was paying attention to the patterns that allowed him access to square 4 or square 8 on all 5 patterns.
So essentially what he would do is when the pattern would start, he would identify which pattern he was working with.
Mhm.
Then he would wait for the right moment and either land on 4 or 8, get money, and usually an extra spin. And in so doing, he went on for like hours with 4 spins, technically, because he kept picking up extra spins.
Right, he kept getting extra spins, so that allowed him to get extra money. Extra spins means extra money, extra spins, extra money, extra spins, extra money. He was basically he could have gone on forever. And it felt like he went on forever because from what you've told me, majority of people, they generally get around like, I don't know, $4,000, $5,000 if they're lucky.
Yeah, that's the thing. $100,000 doesn't sound like that much now when there are game shows like the aforementioned Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But back in those days, it would be rare for anybody to make. Nobody ever got into
the tens of thousands, let alone the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, on a good day, somebody might walk away with like 20 thou, and that's if they're super lucky.
Right, because again, there's the whammy system, so they're constantly resetting. The people are constantly resetting their prize money to 0. So it's like, I'm at 5,000, back to 0. I'm at 3,000, back to 0.
Right, it's a game that's designed to not let you win like that much.
Right.
Because I think the odds of whammying out are like 1 in 7. Mm-hmm. So yeah, most people will either whammy on their first spin or whammy on their second or third. It's very rare to get like a really good run, and this guy just goes and goes. And like I'm saying, like I said before, it's the greatest moment in television history, I think, when they explain how he does it, and then all of a sudden you, the viewer, start seeing it yourself.
Right. You could see, I see 2, 12, 1, 9, 4. 2, 12, 1, 9, 4.
And they've been showing you these clips of him doing this whole time, and you never noticed that 2 of those that he kept landing in the same 2 squares and that they never had a whammy. But after they tell you that, you can't stop seeing that.
Right. It's like, I remember I was watching it with the documentary with you, and he's like, he gets on number 4, then gets number 4, then number 8, number 4, and I'm like, holy shit, how is he getting away with this? How did no one know that the game was broken? And I felt like, so it's just like, I probably feel as stupid as everyone else did, because it's like, it's such an obvious pattern. How did no one see this before? But then I realized I didn't see it before.
Right. Well, there's a moment early on in the documentary where they mentioned that before the game show even premiered, there was a discussion about whether or not they had enough patterns, and it was determined that nobody would figure it out, and that it would be safe. Mm-hmm. But they were wrong. Right. They were dead wrong.
I feel like the most baffling creative decision was to having those 2 squares with no whammies whatsoever.
Yeah, that's really what allowed him to do what he did, if you think about it. Because even if he had memorized all the patterns, all the light patterns, without having a safe square, it's useless to you. Because you could memorize where to land, but there would be no guarantee that there wouldn't be a whammy waiting there for you. You have to have the square that never whammies in order for him to pull this off.
Right. And yeah, in each of those patterns gave him that opportunity. And it's also, I like how there are portions of the documentary where you can tell he was getting so fatigued that there are points where he did not get a 4 or an 8. And those were like the most intense moments, especially his very last spin, where he landed on a square that had a whammy, but he didn't get the whammy. He got like a money prize, thankfully, for him. And so you can tell, like, the documentary pointed out just how exhausted he was by the very end of it, due to all that concentration for like God knows how many rounds.
Right, because he actually did get a whammy on his very first spin of the game.
Right, and that was just him like either testing his formula, or maybe that's him like showing, like playing with the audience, saying, "Oh, look at me, I got a whammy. I'm just like everyone else. Nothing to suspect here."
Yeah, I'm convinced that he did it on purpose to lull everyone into a false sense of security. Because he never made that mistake again. Like you said, there is one moment later on where he happens to land on that exact same square, but it didn't have a whammy in it on that particular occasion. There are a couple instances where he doesn't hit the 4 or the 8, and he was fortunate enough not to wham me out on any of those times. And whenever that happens, that's what sticks out like a sore thumb, because you start watching the 4s and the 8s, and then all of a sudden he'll get one of the corners, and you're like, oh my god.
Although it does help set the odd, like anyone who suspected him of cheating, that definitely like threw people off, thinking, oh, maybe it was random.
All right, well, I remember watching this for the first time in 2003. Mind you, I'm a small child. I'm not a small child, but I'm a child.
Yeah,
and
you're like 9 years old, I think, because you were in 94, right?
Yeah, so I would have been 9.
Yeah, you're old enough to understand what's going on.
This dude seemed like he was fucking magic or some shit. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, how is he doing it? Is he Satan? And then they reveal, the pattern thing, and it blows your mind, especially because the mystery was even more drawn out with like commercials and everything. You know, this is like an hour and 20 minutes to watch on YouTube, but on TV this was like a 2 or 3 hour affair with all the commercial breaks and everything. So like. I just remember this long, drawn-out process of like just being glued to the television screen, like, how is he doing it? And then they reveal it, and it's like that moment in a heist movie where they reveal the whole plan, and you're like, you son of a bitch! Like this.
Absolutely, and it's just so crazy to think that. I love how like as soon as the host explains during the reunion portion, as soon as he explains the formula, and he allows the other two contestants to try it out for themselves on just one pattern, and after a couple misfires, they were able to get like number 4 like again and again, the fourth square again and again and again.
Right, the one dude kept playing this simulated game so long that he was actually able to earn more money than Michael had earned in the original game. Although it's important to remember that they were only working with one pattern, whereas Michael had the added responsibility of memorizing 5 separate patterns and figuring out which pattern was going on at any given time.
Right. And like, it's
the man is a genius, but he's also an idiot.
Right.
We'll get to the idiot part in a minute, but let's just appreciate the genius of what he pulled off here.
Okay, in that case, I do want to mention the two other contestants. Like during the recording back in 1984, we had like the one dude who was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this," and then you got the other woman on the other side of him. He's like, "Oh Jesus Christ, I can't fucking believe this."
She's so annoyed. She's my favorite part. You watch her facial expressions through the entire ordeal.
She is fucking pissed.
She's like, "Fuck this guy." Yeah. And then they interview her in 2003, and you can tell that she was still salty about it. Like,
right, and the other guy who's like, "Oh golly gee, I can't believe it. I'm absolutely shocked. I'm impressed at this." It's like they couldn't. It's like it was I don't know if it was fate or what, but they got like the two perfect like type of personalities to balance Michael Larson in this competition.
Yeah, that guy, Ed, his name was, he was just sort of like, at a certain point, he was like, I can't even get mad at this. Like, this is too impressive. Like, right. I don't even care that I've lost this game.
And the woman is like, that son of a bitch, I knew he was up to something.
Yeah, she tries to screw him over at the end of the game. She passes her remaining spins. She passes her remaining spins to him, thinking, no, there's no way that I can earn more money than he did on the board. But if I can just force him to wham me out, then I'll get to keep my pittance, and he will walk away with nothing.
Right. And then at that point, like he barely got out of a whammy, and then at that point he sent like the rest of his spins to someone else, I think.
Yeah, wow, man. It's really back and forth. I recommend everybody listening to this podcast, if you haven't already, to watch the actual documentary. Again, it's available on YouTube. Andres put it in the description of the previous video.
Yeah, and I'll probably do it again here. Also, apparently there are actual recordings of those episodes on YouTube as well. However, if you've never seen these Press Your Luck episodes, I recommend going into the documentary first, blind, and then watching the episodes.
Right, because watching the episodes is impressive because it's like, oh, how did he do this? But watching the documentary, I think, is more interesting because it walks you through the episodes. Like, you get all the beats of what happened, but it also explains to you how he did it, and it has that great payoff. But I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't already, just because I don't know if us talking about it is really doing an adequate job of conveying the drama to you. But trust me when I tell you that this is gripping television.
Absolutely. Before at the beginning and ending portions of the documentary, they did had some recreation moments where they got actors to play the parts of Michael Larson, his wife, and him standing in front of a bunch of TVs. I don't know how someone could afford that many TVs back in the 80s, but he was there. And it's funny enough, the guy that got to play Michael Larson in those recreations, I mentioned to you, he kind of looks a bit like Tom Segura with a fuller beard.
A little bit, but he's also a pretty good shoo-in for.
Yeah, because the thing about Michael Larson, he looks way older than he actually does.
Yeah, he's only in his 30s.
30s. Yeah, and he looks like he's in his 50s. He looks like Santa. He looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah, he's full Santa Claus. I don't know if it's genetic or if he had lived a rough life, but because they even show some pictures early on of him as a slightly younger man, when he went his first couple marriages, and he's a lot skinnier and he doesn't look that old, but something happened.
Yeah. It was all that he kept pressing his luck so much that he ended up pressing off a few years off his life.
I'll tell you who looks exactly like him also is his brother, who they interview in the documentary. Exact same. If you put a beard on that guy, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
Right. Who knows? Maybe that was Michael Larson, Dylan.
Oh my gosh.
He's pressing his luck to this very day.
He survived and passed himself off as his own brother. It's I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but there's this remote village in the north of Japan that believes that Jesus escaped his crucifixion and then moved to Japan, and they have a burial site for him and everything.
Wow.
The locals are convinced of this story. Yeah, no, Jesus is buried here. He's right over there.
What he walked? No, I was thinking where would he walk from Jerusalem over to Japan? Did he walk across the bit of the sea to get there?
Yeah, no, I don't even think there had been any contact between those two parts of the world at that point. Yeah. But whatever.
And I thought the Mormon mythology was strange. Was bizarre.
But yeah, that's what Michael Larson did. He narrowly escaped what we thought was
he escaped to Japan.
He narrowly escaped his throat cancer to Japan, and then came back years later, posing as his own brother.
Let's see. Oh yeah, and so I like the idea of, not the idea, but I like the execution of portraying his sort of deteriorating family life, his sort of his broken relationship with his then what they call common law wife.
Yeah. They weren't
legally married.
Right. Well, a common law thing is
because I never heard of this before this documentary.
Right. It's sort of like a domestic partnership, which was what gay people were allowed to do before they got the actual marriage. It's similar to that. It's just you get some of the perks of being married, but it's not the full shebang.
Okay. So yeah, I like that idea. It was crazy. They only focused on his most recent partner. But when they mentioned he had 3 kids from 3 different wives, I'm whoa! Why didn't we learn more about this story here?
Right. Well, they mentioned early on that he had 2 previous marriages.
Okay.
Before the common law wife, but they didn't really spend much time talking about that. I guess because it wasn't relevant to
the game show portion.
The scandal, which is what the thing is all about, really.
Yeah, I get that, but I really wish that we could have gotten more of an insight on Michael Larson's life before and especially after the game show, because I feel like they really rushed over those portions of his life in favor of focusing solely on the game show part. But maybe, who knows, maybe legally they couldn't get that much into Michael Larson. Maybe the people involved didn't want to get that personal, or maybe it's just they thought the game show portion was the most interesting part of it, which it certainly was, and I'm glad they went as in-depth as they did with the game portion itself. But I
absolutely agree with you. It's also important to remember, though, that this is a made-for-TV documentary that was crafted specifically for the Game Show Network.
Right, so they got to talk about the game show in the Game Show Network.
Right. It's all about, look at this crazy game show scandal that happened. Also, partially an advertisement for the version of Pressure Luck that was on at the time.
True.
Which was called Whammy, the all-new Pressure Luck. It was a childhood favorite of mine.
Okay.
So yeah, that's... there's a lot of reasons I feel like that you're right. They could have delved more into that. That being said, with what we did get, I felt like I got a pretty good feel for the man and what he was like and what he was all about.
Yeah. It seems like a guy who really was. I made the joke before, but he kept pressing his luck throughout his life. He was obsessed with get-rich-quick schemes. He went for the ultimate get-rich-quick scheme with the game show. And by the end, that's still, despite having enough money to essentially be set for fucking life in Ohio, like just investing in real estate, he had to continue. He had to keep getting more money. And this was the part that was really brushed over, which I feel like should have been focused on more than anything else, was how he lost his money, because it made it seem like he lost all his money by someone breaking into his house and stealing it all. But really, apparently he was spending a lot of his money in illegal schemes, and then having the rest of it stolen was the final straw. Yeah,
he lost the bulk of it, I think, from the robbery because he had it all in his house in bags.
Because the thing
Don't do that.
The thing was, he asked for the majority, all that was left of his money. He asked for it in $1 bills he took it all out of the bank in $1 bills, because apparently there was some radio contest where if you had a $1 bill with a certain code on it, you could win more money. And so
you match the serial number to the radio show, and then you can win more money.
Right. So he had $100,000 worth of $1 bills, and so he and his common law wife were just looking through all these dollar bills, put them in bags, leave these bags apparently in the fucking living room, just for someone who knew who he was and knew of his money, just broke in and just stole all of it. So it's you motherfucker, you couldn't just keep that in the bank.
It really is a fucking Greek tragedy, It's so compelling.
He was taken down by his own hubris.
Exactly. He rose to the tippy top of the world. He slew the beast known as CBS, stole all their Star Trek money. But then he lost it all by just being a dumbass. It's so sad. It's so sad. You wanted him to do well after all that. After he went through all that craziness, you wanted to be and then he lived happily ever after because he's an American treasure. But no, he MC hammered himself hard.
And then apparently he was a bit of a bastard, and almost at that point it seemed like no one wanted to deal with his shit anymore. And I feel like even before they lost the money, his wife seemed to have been done with him, as he just became more and more obsessed with money. It's that wasn't enough for him. He just needed to have more, and he was willing to get that at any cost. And obviously, he got himself in a lot of legal trouble. There was a portion we were talking about right before recording with the FBI. They contacted his brother saying, "Do you know where he's at?" And he's like, "I don't know, and I don't want to know."
Yeah. Well, his wife also mentions, his common law wife, that she didn't even watch when his Pressure Luck episodes aired.
Right, because even before then she was done with him, because at that point he was just ignoring his family completely, it seemed, in favor of just continue studying the past episodes of Press Your Luck.
Right, and they never come out and tell us what he did to make her dislike him.
Yeah.
But they communicate it very well. Through the reenactment portions, the actor playing Michael Larson will be sitting in the living room watching the televisions and studying the patterns, and you'll see the actress playing his wife in the kitchen, just giving him these dirty looks, and it's such an efficient way of telling you the whole story without having to even spend a minute on it.
Absolutely.
So it's all done through just subtext and background stuff. That's very clever stuff, I think.
Right.
But yeah, if there's any moral to this story, it's that if you con CBS out of $100,000, keep it in the bank, man.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. I told you this before. It's like that episode of SpongeBob where like Squidward and SpongeBob threw out Mr. Krabs' old mattress, unaware that Mr. Krabs put all his savings into that mattress, and so Squidward's like, "Haven't you ever heard of a bank?" And Mr. Krabs was like, "No."
Yeah. Michael Larson really is Mr. Krabs in many ways.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty much spot on right there. And so pretty much I think he just continued to try to earn back his money until eventually he developed throat cancer. And there was like an old interview from like, I don't know, 1999 or something, where he was interviewing someone for money and just telling everyone how he did it, which I guess apparently didn't catch on since most of us didn't find out until this 2003 documentary. But
right, apparently there was some movie that came out in the 90s. They mentioned it in the documentary by name, but I don't remember what it was called. There was a movie that came out in the 90s.
Probably not as good.
About a different game show scandal, and so there was kind of there was like a lot of interest in the public about game show scandals, and so he got interviewed on the news. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of telling the story, and you can tell in the interview that there's something wrong with his voice, and it's because he had already started to develop the throat cancer. He also says something kind of interesting in that interview. He says, I think I figured out some angles on that. And I'm sitting here thinking, how do you con Jeopardy? Like, I wish that had happened.
I can imagine at that point he would have just... I bet you at that point he already had like a lifetime ban. Like, they pretty much got him a lifetime ban on Press Your Luck, because usually they get the champion from the last episode to join, but here they're like, nope, you're the number one champion, so you don't need to come back.
I mean, and Jeopardy is a game where if somebody keeps winning, they keep bringing them back. Uh-huh. Like there was that Ken Jennings guy, he was on there for months. Oh, okay. That was like a really famous thing. He was like the champion for a long time. There was another guy recently who had like a really long run. He might have even made more than Ken Jennings, I'm not sure. But like, imagine how long Michael Larson could have been on there.
Right.
Meanwhile, CBS was like, yeah, you're never coming back. They like amended the rules to be like, we are declaring you the all-time Press Your Luck champion. Leave and never return.
Yeah, now go fuck yourself.
That's the other great thing about the documentary, is all the stuff with like the CBS executives behind us.
Because they were just losing their shit. They're like, oh god, what are we gonna do?
And then after it's over, they have this big meeting like, do we have to pay the man? And they're like, he didn't cheat technically, so yeah, we have to pay the man.
Yeah. And I think like there was like someone accused someone, like one executive, she was accusing someone of finger pointing, and then we immediately cut to another interviewer where another executive was like, there was no finger pointing, we all came to an agreement.
And that just lets you know that there was definitely finger pointing.
Yeah.
So much finger pointing. That man was pointing his finger all over that room.
He was the finger pointer.
You just cut to like reenactments of like the producers behind the scenes, like watching what's going on, and they're like fidgeting and they're like tapping their pencils and they're like, what are we gonna do? What's going on? What the fuck?
I can only imagine like how much, like $110,000, like how much of a percentage of money that was for CBS's entire savings.
It's like that feeling when you have like a dirty little secret and then you can just tell that somebody's figured it out.
Right? Like, oh fuck.
You're like, oh god, he knows. He knows.
We're doomed.
Look what he's doing. 4-8.
I didn't think it was possible. I never believed in the legends.
And then like immediately after he left the game, they immediately changed the big board. They upped the number of patterns from 5 to like 32 or some crazy number like that. They
So you gotta be like some sort of like savant of some kind to like your brain has to be like dedicated to memorizing patterns and nothing else in order to memorize that much shit.
And then I think they even made sure to put whammies in those 2 squares so that that was no longer an issue. And then they cut to the version of Whammy that was on in 2003, Whammy, the all-new Press Your Luck, and they show that big board, which was as close to random as you can actually get with a computer.
Right. I didn't even know about this, but you mentioned to me while we were watching this how like computers technically can never really truly program something that is completely random because...
Because you can't program randomness.
Because computers are programmed to follow orders. And
right.
so,
At the end of the day, there's still, no matter how random it appears, at the end of the day, there's got to be some kind of algorithm behind it. So,
uh-huh.
but they're so good now that we can get so close to random that it's almost negligible.
Right.
But still,
it might as well be considered random to the human eye.
But still, as a technicality, it's not technically random.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with this documentary. That's just a nice little fun fact for everybody out there. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a computer scientist listening to this who will go on a tirade in the comments about how I'm wrong about that. But that's my understanding.
Yeah, and let's see. At the end of the documentary, we eventually get like a big reunion of all the people who were interviewed, and so they. I have to mention. Yeah, he did have throat cancer, and he eventually died in 1999. It is a little it is quite tragic because it's apparently he wanted to reconnect with his son before he passed away, or his children or maybe his children in general. But apparently nobody wanted to see him again. So it's like it seemed like he was a person who had regrets over how he spent his life, and ended up taking those regrets to his grave.
I'm telling you, man, this needs to be a movie. It's so Shakespearean and tragic and Greek-like. It's the perfect story. Why isn't this a movie? The real fun of it is to just watch him fucking just go to town on CBS, no loop, just for
you just fuck him straight in the ass.
Just 2 straight half hours of television of him just railing on him.
I know. And the moment you start, I love it. Like the moment it clicks in your head and you realize what he's doing, it's just hilarious. He's just going spin after spin after spin.
Because then you're in on it and you're watching him do it, and you feel like you're doing it. You know, you feel like you're the one who's up there, like fucking him in the ass. And you're like, yeah, one more time. And then there's that great moment where the dollar sign disappears from his little board.
Yes, because they never reached that high.
Right, they were never expecting anyone to reach 100,000. So the little digital scoreboard on the front of his podium, they had to get rid of the dollar sign to make room for the one.
I was watching this and I was like, how the fuck are they gonna put that high of a number on it? And it's like, oh my god, the dollar sign's gone.
That was a magical moment. It's like when you watch the mile marker in your car turn over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, so, yeah, that was it truly was a magical moment once you're like fully aware of everything, and I do like it. They do highlight him, and yeah, the man was a genius. He just had to sacrifice everything personal. Everything that was near and dear to him to make it happen. Right,
he was a genius in many respects, and an idiot in some very important other respects.
Right. Yeah. And I only wish that I knew exactly what he did to get in trouble with the law, because it sounded like it was pretty serious shit if the FBI was contacting his family for information on him.
Right. They didn't go into great detail about all that. I don't know if there were legal reasons why they couldn't, or again, if it was just a matter of, we have so much runtime and we really want to focus on the game show portion.
Right.
If not a movie, then somebody should write a really in-depth book about this also. Maybe it's been done. I don't know. Maybe I should go look.
Oh, okay. Here's something interesting on the Wikipedia, on the wiki article for Michael Larson. In 2017, Spanish author Javi de Castro published a graphic novel about the scandal titled Larson, el hombre con más suerte del mundo, which is Larson, the luckiest man in the world. So apparently there's a Spanish comic book made about him.
Wow.
That's pretty random.
I would have never imagined the Spaniards to be the ones to be like, oh, Michael Larson.
Santa Maria!
Vámonos!
And yeah, I'm looking it up on Google Images. Larson, el hombre con más suerte del mundo. And it's a black and white comic with a rather appealing art style here. It's almost a bit like Dilbert, sort of.
Huh.
Yeah, I'll share it with you after the recording. But yeah, so Larson, his name is certainly up in lights when it comes to the history of game shows, and so I doubt I can ever find a story as interesting as this, to where someone just completely broke the system. But if there's never any another person like Michael Larson ever again, he will certainly be like a 1 in a million story here. And so this is certainly going to be a documentary I will never forget. And yes, I guess too,
I haven't, obviously,
right, after all these years. And so yes, I will definitely fully endorse this documentary, and I highly recommend to anyone, even as someone who has like maybe like a passing interest, again like Star Trek, but even like less of a passing interest in game shows in general. I highly endorse this. I fully 100% endorse this product.
Wow, he was so excited to fully endorse it that he just came out and endorsed it. I didn't even have to ask him. He was just like, yes, damn it,
yes, 1,000 times. Watch me press the button with both of my hands to say yes.
That was another cool thing. They pointed out like the way he held his hands over the button so that he could strike like really quickly, and during the quiz round.
Yeah, and then they got the other two people were copying him as well once they were practicing the pattern reading.
Yeah, because then you watch them try to hit the buzzer, and it's obvious how much slower they are because they have to like bring their hand up and then bring it back down. He's just like hovering over the button, like bam.
He is ready to strike like a viper.
And he goes into like these trance-like states where he's just watching the pattern go around on the bowl.
He's like little beady eyes. He's like, me.
He is just like zoned in. It's really
it's like a hunter ready to hunt that cash.
It's amazing to see. I can't put into words how impressive this thing is. If you haven't seen it yourself, go watch it. Everyone,
do it. Yes,
do it now.
Just do it.
It's not a tumor. Now, what about? I think we've got into great detail about the story of this documentary and why it's so amazing. And like I told you before, if this is the sort of thing that the internet historian would have made a video about if it had happened on the internet.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he'll do one on like Pop Quiz Hotshot or something like that.
Oh Jesus. But the other question is, production wise, what do you think about because this is a made for TV documentary.
Right.
I mean, it's not exactly.
Minimal.
It's not going to win an Oscar or anything, but
it helps that the majority of the and maybe that's why again they didn't go into a lot of his backstory, Michael Larson's personal backstory or personal history, because like the majority of it is focused on the game show from the 1984, and so that allows the TV movie to rely mostly on stock footage from those two episodes.
Right.
But and the section where the former game show host, who is the host of the documentary, he is talking to the former contestants. That was all well done. It seemed like they were in like a studio warehouse with some props from other CBS shows. Everything worked well. Again, it's that very minimalistic style, but it worked well enough. It was simple, clean, to the point. And it helped get the message across and look professional enough to come across as entertaining, especially with the minimal recreations with the actors playing Michael Larson and his common law wife, as well as the what was I going to mention? Like the interviews, especially. Yeah, they got the right people to really go in depth and explain everything that revolved around the game, the episodes, and the before, during, and after it.
Absolutely. It's like you said, the bulk of this is in the stock footage from the Michael Larson episodes, which were only ever broadcast on TV the once. CBS refused to ever show that footage again until this documentary came about. And they really do milk that stock footage, but in a very good way. They break it down frame by frame, and they really go all in, and they like point out everything to you. That it's very thorough,
right?
Extremely thorough, and then I appreciated that.
Well, it's funny, like, during the few times where they would show, like, a montage of him hitting the button, and it's just time after time after time of him screaming at the top of his lungs whenever he won money, and it's also funny, like, they also point out, like, he would just scream, like, not even looking at what he got. As soon as he got that square, he starts, like, cheering on.
Yeah, he hits the buzzer and immediately starts screaming before he even knows what he landed on it, because he already knows that he's won. That's how foolproof this system is that he had devised. It's a thing of beauty.
Right. So
it's nothing like watching a job go right. You know.
Yeah.
Thing of like a well-oiled machine.
Absolutely.
So yeah, they do a lot of interesting things, like I said, with breaking down the frames by frames and doing things like that. There's a few interesting things they do with like green screen, where like current day Peter Tomarken will like walk up on the screen next to his past self.
That's probably like the most technically impressive moment in the whole documentary, maybe.
And you get to see him standing next to his younger self, and you think, oh, he's aged pretty well.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like Jurassic Park, you know, when they're doing the "Hello, John." Hello, John. Yeah.
Right. I remember you made that joke as well. So
yeah.
Is there anything else to cover before we wrap things up, since we're nearing the hour mark?
I guess not. No. No. I think we've done a pretty adequate job of conveying what I like to call the legend of Michael Larson. Yeah, we both fully endorse this made-for-TV documentary. Go watch it.
Absolutely.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
There are a few different links on YouTube that you can watch this from. The one that we used and the one that we have in the description is the one that has the best audio. So that's definitely the one you'll want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's it. You want to go ahead and enlighten them as to what we will be reviewing next time?
Yes, absolutely. So just to be sure I get the title right, so what we're looking at is a topic that I have been fascinated with since it originally happened. So like, I remember I wasn't keen on this particular music festival, this disastrous music festival that occurred in, I believe, 2017. But I did learn about it a while afterwards, thanks to someone we previously mentioned, the Internet Historian. Great, great YouTuber. Check out his content. It's amazing, well edited. Very almost like sort of. His content is like half professional, half comedically like silly looking and cheap, but it's like a. He talked about the Fyre Festival, Fyre spelled Fyre, which was this big music festival that was going to be in the Bahamas, run by a businessman named Billy McFarlane and Ja Rule, former rapper Ja Rule, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. And so I learned about it, and everyone had talked about the Fyre Festival just because it was such a huge dumpster fire of an event. And so it's like, it's one of those things, just like very similar to the Press Your Luck scandal. It was just so unbelievably crazy. It's almost like hard to believe that it's true, that a bunch of like rich kids went out into the Bahamas and were greeted with like no food, barely any resources, barely any sort of like amenities, nothing. So eventually, I believe this was this was early 2019, earlier this year in January actually. There were two documentaries that came out, one exclusively on Hulu and one on Netflix. I've seen both of them, and so I preferred the Netflix version, which is Fyre, the greatest party that never happened. And so
yes.
I've talked about the Fyre Festival with some of my friends from the Sons of Sarazawa podcast before, but I don't think any of you guys have ever really like delved into it. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't know for why, but I'm just obsessed with sort of like these sort of train wreck events.
No, I've watched the Internet Historian video,
okay.
So I know all about it from that, and I would recommend everybody go watch that video.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Also, the one about what was that furry convention?
Rainforest, yeah.
Rainforest,
and one of his first videos, DashCon.
Right. Watch all of those.
Yes.
Also, anything on his channel that has to do with Shia LaBeouf.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm just attracted to these giant train wreck events because, like a train wreck, you can't look away from it.
Organizing events is hard.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes things go wrong, especially if you're over enthusiastic and partnered with Ja Rule.
Yes. And attempting to pull off something with so crazy, so ambitious, with very little money and even less time to make it happen. So yeah, with the documentary, Dylan here will be learning all the ins and outs of what occurred, what led to the Fire Festival kind of sort of not happening, and what occurred afterwards, similar to what happened to Michael Larson. And so I'm looking forward to introducing Dylan to this, and we'll see whether or not he will fully endorse Fire, the greatest party that ever happened, as much as I will.
Turns out December is the month of documentaries here on Fully Endorsed. So
Right.
look forward to that. As I said, I know the story of Fire Festival, but it'll be interesting to get a much more in-depth look at the disaster.
Indeed. So, would you like to sign us out, Dylan?
Yeah, everybody, go watch Big Bucks, the Pressure Luck Scandal. I've been Super DM64, and he has been Kaiju Noir. And until next time, take care.
See you next time, everybody.